Hey everyone, I hope all of you have a wonderful day today and welcome to Planet Zoo and the second episode of Ozaru. Today we are going to build 3 habitats, the Warthogs, the Peafowls and finally the Tapirs. And I'm going to be completely honest to you guys, I needed to look up the pronunciation of Tapirs. Because it's one of those animals that well at least I read about but never really thought about how to pronounce their name. So anyway, with that out of the way, I want to quickly talk about 2 things that happened. The first, which is way less important than the second one, but you might already hear it, but I'm coming down with a flu, so you might hear that in my voice today. But the second thing that I want to talk about, which is way more important and actually has an impact on today's video, is that you might have already seen it, but we are starting off in a brand new zoo because in between the first video of Ozaru and this video, the save file of Ozaru got corrupted, I think, because it just wouldn't open. Like I tried to open it and it would constantly crash, like even before like actually getting into the park. But anyway, I'm going to try and recreate as much of the original Ozaru as possible. Luckily the pagoda, I wanted to say Ogoda, I don't know why, but anyway, the pagoda was luckily blueprinted, so that's going to be completely the same. It's also in almost the complete same location. The lookout point is going to be maybe a little bit different because of research. I have a little bit more pieces because I actually thought of researching stuff this time, and the lemurs are going to be in the exact same location. Their habitat is a little bit bigger and they were way more annoying this time. Because I think a lot of people have ran into this problem. But, well, whenever the keeper went into the lemur habitat that I built for, well, this version of Ozaru, he would come in with food and then the food would just magically disappear. And so my lemurs, like I constantly got the notification that my lemurs were starving. Luckily though, there's a way to fix it, or at least to temporarily fix it, because if you send your lemurs or actually any animal to your quarantine center, they get out completely fine. So I constantly had to send my lemurs back to the quarantine center and then wait until they were completely fine again and then send them to their habitat so that I wouldn't constantly get the notification that they were starving. I hope that gets fixed before the full release, but I think a lot of people are pointing that out, so it probably will. But anyway, for what I actually ran into for today's video is that, well, it's for a sandbox player, it might be a little bit more annoying than for someone who actually, really wants to play in franchise mode, or wants to play with money, researching stuff and all that. But as I said, we are going to build 3 habitats. But, well, first off we have the Warthogs and the Peafowls, and I ran into a problem because the Warthogs and Peafowls on their own weren't appealing enough to actually attract visitors to really come into Ozaru. So that is why between building the Peafowls and the Tapirs, I actually had to build the lemur habitat. I actually also had to take a loan because, as I said, the people didn't really come to Ozaru. I first thought, oh, it's a bug, because they would, on the road to Ozaru, halfway they would turn around and go back out of the park or the zoo. I'm really still like with my mind in Plant Coaster where everything is parked there. Here, everything is a zoo. But anyway, so I had to build the lemur habitat because they were more appealing animals and way more annoying, but we've already went into that. So when you're building your zoo, you actually you really need to pay attention to the appeal of your animals. For a sandbox player, that might be a little bit more annoying because you just want to put your animals where they are prettiest. Or at least that's when I think about building habitats. So yeah, that was something I ran into. Like, it's very good for like a realistic zoo, because thinking about it, like, I love red pandas and from all the zoos that I've been to, they are always like at the back of the zoo. So I need to walk through the entire zoo and walk alongside a lot of other animals that I originally didn't plan on seeing, just to get to the animals that are like appealing to me. And this is maybe a little bit controversial, but between red pandas and giant pandas, or like, you know, the standard pandas, I prefer the red pandas because, I don't know, like the giant pandas for me are a little bit boring. But anyway, the baby versions of both of them are adorable, of course. And yes, to the second point, because, well, I could talk about the appeal of animals for probably, well, yeah, quickly also want to note, yeah, the warthog escaped because it jumped over the fence, because the fence wasn't high enough. Actually, animals really like to escape, because I have talked about this in a previous video on Ozaru, but, well, before I built Ozaru, I built an Arabian style zoo, or at least one habitat, because I just couldn't get it to work. But I had a Bengal tiger there, and he constantly jumped at the fence, and it was, in a way, I was scared because I thought like he would actually jump over the fence and he would just jump into like a crowd of people. So I might think he was hungry or just, you know, wanted to scare the shit out of me. But anyway, animals really like to escape. Luckily, with the Bengal tiger, the fence was high enough. There was actually a pond in between the fence and where he could jump from. So the humans or the guests were completely safe. It was just really fun to just constantly see him jumping into the pond. But if you took it, like, if you paused the game at the right moment, like, the jumping animation for many animals is actually very nice to see. So anyway, I'm getting off topic again, but anyway, so for, well, you know, again, like, this might be a little bit more annoying for sandbox players, and I hope that you, as a sandbox player in the full release, can toggle this thing off. But there is, like, you know, I wouldn't call it a slider, but there is like a thing with animals with like coverage, where if you build a lot of trees, let's say, they don't like it because they're covered too much. And, you know, for a sandbox player, that might be a bit annoying because you want to, you know, at least I want to have like habitats that are like fully decked out, like fully like everywhere there's nature. And so far, at least in this mode, I hope you can toggle it off in sandbox mode when the full game gets released. But here you do need to take into account that, you know, animals don't want to have just a wild, well, just the complete Amazon in their habitat. So with the peafowls especially, I had to actually, you know, at first I just, you know, went crazy with the habitat, just built, you know, it fully decked out all the trees and such that I wanted, and then I looked in, you know, the information thing that pops up when you select the animal, and then I saw like, oh, they are way too covered for what their needs are. So I actually had to go back and delete trees. So yeah. Also, going back into the appeal thing, yeah, from what I've seen so far, and I might be wrong, like, if I'm wrong, like, this is also like my first attempt, or not, well, it's not my first attempt, but it's like my first look at Plan 2, so I might be wrong, and you might have run into it and really saw like, oh, this is what it's supposed to do. But with the appeal, like, you might make your habitat as pretty as possible, like I did or tried that with the Warthog habitat, but that won't draw in the guests. The guests actually come for the animals, they don't come for a pretty habitat. So, you know, again, have highly appealing animals further along, or just spread around lowly appealing animals. I'm really sad to call the Warthogs not as appealing as the lemurs, because even though I like the lemurs, like, they are, I think, right now the closest thing I can get to red pandas, because again, I'm still sad that they aren't in the beta, but, you know, they were announced like 3 days before the beta, so I understand that they aren't in the beta. But yeah, I like the Warthogs a little bit better, just because they just, I don't know, I think it's just like natural behavior, but they just suddenly just go running across their habitat, and it's really funny to see them just like from a complete standstill just go running head first into, well, not into things because they stop before they actually hit stuff, but it's just fun to see. But it's sad to say that, you know, people don't come to Ozaru for the hedgehogs. The warthogs. The hedgehogs are a lot smaller. Though that would be a nice exhibit animal. You know, if you haven't, well, if you don't know what I'm talking about, exhibits are like the smaller, well, habitats, I would say, but they are like, you know, they are one-piece items where you could like showcase spiders and scorpions and snakes. So anyway, so yeah, hedgehogs might make like a cute and a little bit more, well, adorable like European animal for exhibits. But anyway, back to what we're building, because you can now see I'm going back and deleting a lot of plants, because as I said before, like if you pause it at the right moment, you can see me constantly going back into like their, I don't know what the tab is called, but just looking at like their coverage and just the plants that the animals like, just constantly going back and just deleting more and more trees and plants just so that the coverage of the animal is however they want it. However, I found out that rocks don't go into like coverage. Even if you make a cave, they don't count that as coverage, which might be a little bit strange, but luckily for me it worked out, because then I could actually fill the habitat with another thing. Also, yes, I built like a little bit of like a behind the scenes part of the Peafowls habitat, just because it's, well, the Peafowl habitat has like, well, it's a walkthrough habitat, so I wanted to have like an area where the Peafowls would just be on their own, would, you know, be away from all the guests. However, like I said, like, oh, you know, the Peafowls and the Warthogs aren't highly appealing animals, and yeah, the Peafowl habitat is usually the most, well, swarmed with people right now. However, the most donations still come from the lemurs, because I have no clue. Like, there are less lemurs than Peafowls right now, but they still bring in the most donations because, I don't know, maybe that also goes into appeal. But anyway, yeah, I quickly wanted to build a drink shop, and if you are having issues with like franchise mode and actually like not going bankrupt, I wouldn't advise to build shops at first. This is why I needed to take a loan for the lemur habitat. And yes, by this point the pagoda and the lookout building haven't been built yet, because I had to struggle with getting money. At the point that like the lemurs were in and the tapirs were in, I kinda had like a steady cash flow. But you really like have to take it a little bit slower with building stuff. You need to just wait until you actually have the money. And yeah, if you can avoid getting a loan, always avoid it, because like the moment I basically paid off my loan, then I actually started making money. Before that, I actually lost money. Like, not like I was going bankrupt, but it was just a steady decline. Luckily, like at the right moment, I had paid off my loan, and well, Ozaru right now is actually making a lot of money. I've also like off screen started breeding. Well, it wasn't because I wanted to breed animals, or at least breed wild dogs, but you know, I've seen a lot of people complain about like, oh, you know, my animals are like rabbits, and I constantly have like thousands of babies. And by what where we are at now, like we're at year 9, when I actually started worrying about this subject, it was year 13 and I had no babies. No one. Like the Warthogs, the Peafowls, no animal was having babies. And in franchise mode, or well, franchise and I think career mode, you know, you can get animals with money. Like mostly you want to do that at the start of your zoo, but later on you get conservation points when you release animals into the wild, when you trade animals with other players. Then, well, later on you are more and more dependent on conservation points and less on money, or at least that's my experience so far. And well, you know, you can, of course, you can buy animals and then, well, you can't really resell them for conservation points, or like you can maybe resell them for conservation points for like 2 conservation points. By the time you're, well, when I was in year 13, I was like, I had almost none of those conservation points because I couldn't really, you know, free animals or release them into the wild. I couldn't trade them, so I was really worrying. So I started, you know, building a wild dog habitat because I heard like, oh, those are like actual rabbits, they go crazy. And I was halfway through building the wild dog habitat when I saw, my tapirs are pregnant, or at least my female tapir is pregnant. And so I first really thought like, oh, I'm running into a bug where my animals just don't get pregnant. But I just think that the Peafowls and the Warthogs just weren't getting it on. Yeah, and the baby tapir is by now gone. I have sold him, which might sound sad, like he grew up just to be sold. But in a way it also is in the animal's favor, because the tapirs are, you know, they're like swans. They mate for life and they don't really live in groups, they live in couples. So having the adult child of the tapirs in their habitat actually worked against them, because they didn't want the adult, they didn't want their child anymore, which sounds really sad, but it is true. Here you can see that, yeah, the lemurs are in the quarantine because they just kept dying. Eventually I somewhat fixed it by just, you know, the lemurs also have this like a little bit behind the scene area where their, you know, their shelter is, and I wanted to have like their food there. But eventually I somewhat fixed them starving, or at least the keeper not giving them food, by just giving, well, making the behind the scenes area like completely opening that up. There's like a big empty space there, and somehow now the food does get through. I don't know why, but yeah, I by this point, I think if I'm correct, yes, by this point the pagoda is back in. Yeah, you can quickly see him it's in the background. It's at almost the exact same location, and the wild dogs are in. I actually haven't sold any of the wild dogs yet because they like to live in groups. I might want to, you know, start giving them contraceptives because I don't want incest in my zoo. But anyway, as you can see, I have a little bit more pieces here because I actually remember to actually start researching stuff. So yeah, again, when Plant Zoo fully gets released, I plan to just go into sandbox mode. Also because I want to start off with red pandas, who I think will probably be a little bit more of an expensive animal to start with. But I also think red pandas will probably be like one of those highly appealing animals because, I mean, I have yet to meet someone who doesn't like red pandas, or at least who doesn't dislike them. If you dislike red pandas, I don't trust you. But anyway, back to what we're building, because as I said, I had a little bit more pieces, so, you know, in between basically finishing the shelter for the tapirs, I basically waited a little bit just to get money back to actually, you know, start really decorating the place, because again, franchise mode, I have to, you know, account for money, otherwise my zoo goes bankrupt and then my animals will be sad. But yeah, the roof was a little bit annoying because usually when I build like roofs like this, which, you know, have angles, I usually use like basic piece wood or woods, basic piece roofs. And here I had to build it myself, which I'm still really happy actually with the pieces that I've used for the roofs so far, because, you know, they kind of give like the resemblance of what the actual roofs in real life look like, but they are a little bit more rough. I like my buildings to be a little bit less like, you know, pristine and pretty, and actually have like a little bit of roughness to them. And yes, I used the Indian decor for the East Asian style buildings, just because, you know, pots and such don't really, you know, have their own culture. I mean, clay pots usually look pretty much the same, at least where you have just bare clay pots. Anyway, so that's going to be it for today. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I'm also really thankful for how much you guys liked the first video on Planet Zoo and how you haven't hated my rambling yet. And yeah, I wish you all an amazing weekend. Also, if you like this video, I hope you will enjoy the next video, which is going to be next week, because I've kind of a busy weekend ahead. Anyway, again, wish you all an amazing weekend. Bye bye.